Nada, you can be playing the facilitators so that we get to know them a little bit more. Nada? Thanks. Prof? Prof. Wasonga?
Yes, I'm there in a moment.
Okay. Prof. Chibe, you are welcome. Over to you, colleague.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I'm trying to load my document.
So
I'm looking for my document.
Prof. Kibi, I think Professor Wasonga is already sharing his screen, so it is okay. You can. You will not be able to share when he is already
it is
sharing.
okay.
Okay.
So, Prof, I guess I go first, and then you come afterwards, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think I need to put on my video so that you can all be able to see me.
Yeah, Prof, but if the network is not stable, you will switch it off because the focus will be on the slides.
Okay, so let me hold on that. So, yeah, so once again, I welcome all the participants today. My name is Oliver Wasonga. Just in case there are those who did not attend yesterday's sessions, my name is Oliver Wasonga from the University of Nairobi, the Department of Land Resource Management and Agricultural Technology, the Faculty of Agriculture. And my background is in dryland ecology and climate change adaptation. Yesterday, we basically introduced the module and discussed a bit of the concept and the principles that underpin climate smart agriculture. And then later on, we delve deeper into some of the common climate smart agriculture practices in Africa. So today we want to shift the gears to some of the approaches that we use in implementing or diffusing climate smart agriculture. Aware that there are different audience in this session. Those staff who are staff, and their students, and probably other categories of audience do exist. So I think it's important to be able to pick what is relevant depending on what one intends to do after this or with this knowledge. So let's get on with it, and kindly remember to put your question if you have any comment on the Q&A that is provided, so that we have them on one side instead of having them all over the place in the chat and also Q&A. So kindly do that as we get along to make it easy for us. So I hope my slide is moving and you're able to see what I'm projecting up there. Someone just confirm.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I've indicated, we basically want to look at some of these approaches that we use in implementing or diffusing CSA. Having known what CSA is all about and some of the practices, it is important to get to understand how these are applied, the various approaches used in application. But before we dive deep into that, I'm going through a stepwise kind of procedure, co-creation of knowledge and skills when it comes to climate smart agriculture. And at the very beginning, then one has to understand or get to know what is there. And how we get to know what is there is through research. So one has to create that evidence. And as much as possible to co-create it with the community or the farmers through participatory approaches. Okay. And once we have this evidence. It is this evidence that we use to advocate or create awareness among decision makers and also other stakeholders. Once this is done, then the next step is to conduct what we call the needs or gaps assessment with respect to capacity. Yeah. And then this is followed by capacity building that is informed by the gaps already identified. This is then followed by, the implementation or adoption of these various approaches by the farmers. But then one expects that during adoption or implementation, there should be monitoring of and evaluation to be able to generate some learning and lessons that then also are factored in to make adjustment and improve on these approaches. So there's some feedback loop that goes back to the very beginning and is ingrained into the same process again. So having seen that, I want us to move to one of the approaches used in rolling out the climate smart agriculture practices, and one of them is climate smart village approach. Probably some of you have engaged in this without necessarily calling it this, but it may take different forms. But these are basically sites for agricultural research and development where various approaches for managing climate change in agriculture are tested. So it's an agricultural research for development approach, which is basically meant to test some of these technologies through participatory approaches that involve the very farmers that do, or at the end of the day, do uptake such technologies. So it is meant to empower the farming communities to be climate smart through various approaches. So it kind of provides some kind of a bundle of various services and enabling environment that together are aimed at empowering the farmers to make the right decisions. So one of them is the climate information services and insurance. Probably most of us already know about index-based insurance mechanisms that are now prevalent in crop and livestock systems. But besides that, the farmers are also equipped with the practice and skills of applying various practices and technologies. The other aspect is strengthening the local and national plus the private institutions to support adoption or co-learning and co-creation of technologies that are appropriate and relevant for various locations. So they have to be area specific. There are also services, climate and agro development financing, because then adoption of these technologies require resources. But this approach also incorporates the farmers' knowledge. All the farmers in the rural areas possess rich knowledge, either local or traditional knowledge, which they apply in absence of the conventional technologies. But still, even in the presence of conventional technologies, they still do apply because these are tested, they are tried, and they're found to be working. And so we can only build on what they already know than drastically introducing them to new things. And that has shown to be work well in most farming systems. The other aspect is the policy, which is part of creating the national and subnational conducive policy environment that can support climate smart agriculture. And so the process, as it were, is about understanding the context by doing baseline assessment, understanding the resources that are available and the priorities of the farmers at the local level. And this is meant to help design the climate smart village. And this basically means that the design of the climate smart village would vary from one location to the other, depending on what their priorities are, on what the prevailing climatic conditions are, the type of soils, and so on and so forth. So this would vary. So after that, it's very, very important to base the interventions on evidence. So there's the bit on creating empirical research, then that also helps to make adjustments and to inform the process all along. After all that is done, then what remains is to roll out or scale such kind of technologies developed at the climate smart village. And of course, this will also depend on the prevailing ecological or socioeconomic areas where you want to roll this out to. So one approach would be the farmer-to-farmer approach, where there's exchange visits and farmers are able to learn from what's already being tested and is working. But this scaling is also meant to inform policy. This is where also the decision makers also learn. And when they learn and they have the buy-in, the next thing is that they warm up to it and provide resources and provide technical backstopping. So at the end of the day, having supportive policies to support climate smart practices, which is very, very crucial. At the end of the day, what this promises is the climate smart farming communities. So, as I have alluded to, climate smart villages provide a very good platform for community mobilization and engaging them in participatory processes, which is very, very key for sustainability. And the evidence here is generated, as I've indicated, at local scales of what climate smart agriculture options work best, where, why, and how. And this evidence is used to draw lessons for agricultural development practitioners. It is also used to better inform the policymakers. And this evidence is also very key in informing or guiding investors. because then you have to show them where the money is. Okay. So the smart villages work in a way that they bring together multiple partners in a learning site with the view of building capacity. And here you have different groups, the farmers, self-help groups, scientists, the industry, and other stakeholders coming together to learn, co-learn, and also have capacity enhancement as one of the outputs on this. So the farmers are engaged on different approaches of management of resources, including soil, water, and inputs like seed, fodder, rain. But the other angle of it is also on the design diversification, where farmers are also supported on diversification process of growing different types of varieties of crops and livestock, enhancing biodiversity at farm level. What I need to inform you about the diagram that you are seeing on your screen, this is basically just one of the examples from the CCAF's project in West Africa region. And basically, these different aspect components, as I've already indicated, would definitely change from one area to the other. But there are those which remain the same, regardless of where you are. For example, when you're talking about climate services. So there's the component of the climate services there, weather forecast, providing agro advisories and digital-based dissemination of climate information, and also the component of weather insurance, which again is one aspect where a number of farmers have already embracing. So another aspect for this example is the engaging the farmers on different approaches of mitigation or carbon sequestration practices, including use of crop residues in as mulch, minimum tillage, use of irrigation, and agroforestry, among others. And again, this would basically vary depending on what type of location one is, and depending also on the relevance for that particular area and the priorities, and also the requisite climatic and socioeconomic factors that support would basically vary or support different practices. And as I've indicated, the scaling aspect is not only on adoption of these practices, but also the guidance towards supportive policy formulations. So this approach provides 5 types of decision support to farmers, and one of them, one would expect that a good climate smart village approach would yield agricultural land use plan or contingency plans, which then factor in the current and future climate risk, agroecological and socioeconomic conditions, and also the prevailing markets. So planning is a very important component of this. But one would also expect that at the end of the day, this generates a portfolio of agricultural practices and technologies and programs that do not become maladaptive in the future. So the fact that it is more of area specific, then it means that, and the fact that it involves the farming communities in co-creation, then it means that you are likely to end up with a relevant, sustainable practices that suit those particular areas. So reducing the chances of farmers ending up with maladaptation or inappropriate adaptation practices. So it also provides strategic guidance before and during planting season on most suitable climate smart agriculture practices, technologies, services, process, and institutional options. And this in view of the prevailing market situations and also with respect to resource availability too. So another benefit expected from the CSVs is that it provides a tactical guidance to farmers on using real-time weather forecasts and also value-added information and communication technology based agro advisories. And these are very, very key because then decisions to evade or to minimize risk that are associated with climate requires real-time, not just real-time, but timely information, accurate as well. So these are very key for accessing good quality inputs and technologies for improving water, nutrient, and energy use efficiencies, as well as on risk transfer through insurance mechanisms in case of crop and livestock losses. This is one area where not very many farmers have ventured into, but I think it's now being aggressively promoted, of course, with a lot of challenges, especially in the extensive livestock production systems. So another benefit is the policy level guidance on barriers and options to mainstream CSA in local and national development, including consideration of financial needs to drive scaling. So this is one aspect that is very important that basically is informed by the evidence created from the climate smart villages aimed at informing decision makers. Next is the farmer field schools. And one of the questions that one would ask here is the difference between this and the climate smart villages approach. The climate smart villages approach is more research oriented, basically about testing particular bundles of technologies through research for development approach. Whereas farmer field school is more of, a school without walls for farmers where they engage together to co-learn and share experiences. So the farmer field schools approach actually evolved from the concept that optimal learning is derived from experience, in the case of farmers, from what they observe in the field. More effective learning occurs on what they can practically observe and do in their own farms. So it is a group-based learning process that integrates the domain of ecology and non-formal education and gives the farmer opportunity to share their experiences and learn from each other. So it's basically based on learning by doing, with the ultimate goal of building the capacity of farmers to make informed decisions. Yeah, it is a platform for farming communities for experiential learning in agriculture. So it's normally composed of groups of farmers who meet regularly during the course of the growing season. And they experiment as a group on various options at their disposal. And through such kind of practices and feedbacks, the ultimate aim is to increase the capacity of farmers to test new climate-smart agriculture technologies in their own fields and assess results and their relevance to their particular circumstances. So they conduct their own tests, their own experiment with various options at their disposal, and be able to evaluate this by themselves and make informed decisions. So they interact more or less on a more demand-driven basis with researchers, extension workers, especially when they need help, because they will definitely be having questions to ask as they try various options. So their activities involve very simple experiments, as I've indicated, and these are followed by regular field observations and group analysis of the kind of outcomes that they can observe. So the knowledge that is generated from such kind of activities are used by this group of farmers to make their own locally specific decisions about crop management and environmental conservation practices. And they use different approaches in what we call the non-formal education approaches. And these involve basically sharing case studies, very informal case studies. Other approaches that can be used here are also role plays or dramatized sessions, problem-solving exercises, and both small and big group discussions, brainstorming, and simulation games are some of the approaches that can be used to put across or to disseminate or to facilitate the process of co-learning. So this approach enable and empower the farmers to understand and respond to the contemporary challenges, make their own critical contributions to both their local goals, national goals, and also global development goals. So it is about the people, their development, and their empowerment. And that's why it's basically different from our traditional or the mainstream extension system, which is basically designed to transfer technology. So the next one, which takes more of a landscape approach, a holistic approach, is the functional land management approach. And some of this may not be very new to you. The functional land management approach integrates sustainability principles and the functional capacity of the soil and land to deliver primary productivity. And of course, other ecosystem services other than provision of tangible products. It provides a framework for managing soil-based ecosystem services from our agroecosystems. So it's based on the premise that whatever happens, any sustainable practice that happens at the farm level may benefit the larger catchment or may benefit the larger landscape. So this approach looks at a management, various interventions or climate smart agriculture practices that suits different parts of the larger ecosystem, because definitely different climate smart practices would be applied in different parts of the landscape, depending one on the type of use or land use in those areas, depending on the type of soil, depending on the slope, and depending on the climate, and so on and so forth. So just to emphasize the bit on ecosystem services, what one is interested when you're looking at things at that landscape level is basically different goods and services that we get from the larger ecosystem, besides producing food at farm level. And these are the provisioning services, which include food, water, fuel, and fiber, all these products that you get from the ecosystem. Regulating services, and this include clean air, filtration of water as part of the ecosystem services, control of floods and erosion, carbon sequestration. Okay. Supporting services that include nutrient cycling, sustenance of biodiversity and genetic resources, and also cultural services that provide opportunities for recreation, education, and spiritual, as well as cultural enrichment. So this is a more of an integrated, holistic approach of looking at things, such that the focus is not only at the farm level, but at the larger landscape, because most of the resources are managed to provide benefits beyond the farm level when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So I'm not sure whether this is clear, but this basically just exemplifies some of the various interventions or practices that can be done at landscape level on different parts of the landscape. So one of them, for example, will be protecting the natural habitats, like the natural forests, the grasslands, through various ways to ensure that they continue providing the various ecosystem services. And this could be done through, for example, payment of climate services, securing land tenure rights, and community free control, giving incentive to the communities to conserve what they have by also allowing them to benefit from such services from these areas. The other one is restoration of degraded watersheds and rangelands. And this is important because it provides more of a win-win kind of situation in addressing climate change, providing or enhancing ecosystem services, products and services that we get from the ecosystem, food and water and so on. So basically restoring the ecosystem services by rehabilitating degraded areas. The other one is enrichment of soil carbon. So, and this may involve management of agricultural or farmlands to reduce emissions through various ways, by reducing, having minimum tillage as one approach, reducing use of nitrogen fertilizers, preventing erosion, and increasing organic content through various ways, including addition of biochar, one of the one of the approaches that is currently being promoted. And then there is farm adding or incorporating the woody plants, woody perennials, and as well as non-woody perennials in the our farmlands. And one of the advantage of doing this is because these provide long-term biomass and also have a root, elaborate root systems that act as a important, or rather important for carbon storage, and they also increase water infiltration because they act as funnels that channel water that comes through rain into the soil and reduce also runoffs that cause erosion. We also have climate-friendly livestock systems, basically concerned with the sustainable management of grazing, but also improvement of feed resources to reduce methane emissions, as well as manure management, proper manure management, because then one aspect that determines emissions from livestock systems is basically how we handle and manage the manure that comes from livestock. So the core concept of the functional land management approach is the multifunctionality of soils that also deliver multiple functions simultaneously. But some of them deliver certain ecosystem services better than others. And so we have to manage them in a way that they are able to deliver best such services that they are more appropriate for. So this framework seeks to optimize the supply of soil functions from the land through sustainable use of soil resources. And one way of doing this is through building the soil organic matter. And we know that soils are one of the biggest, rather the third largest carbon pool on Earth's surface. So by sustaining or managing soils in a sustainable way ensures that we have a lot of carbon stored in the soil. Okay. Studies of course have also shown that the below ground biomass stores a lot of carbon. So sometimes we may focus very much on the trees and so on and forget about our soils, and yet in some areas where there's very scarce or trees, and as you find in the grasslands, much of the carbon is stored below ground, the root biomass. So minimum tillage is one way of conserving soil organic matter pool, and use of cover crops. Crop residues also enhance organic matter that is stored in the soil. So another way is through efficient management of water, and water is one of the resources that are actually threatened by climate change. And so through efficient use of practices that ensure efficient use of water or enhancing soil moisture regime are very key in climate change adaptation, and also enhancing productivity from the land. So some of the best practices in irrigation are irrigation, water harvesting, use of various soil and water conservation techniques or technologies to be able to improve water use efficiency and conservation are very key. Water being one of the resources that are limited or threatened by climate change. Another one is employing integrated nutrient management principles, such as green manure, use of green manure, planting nitrogen fixing crops, and incorporating livestock manure into the soil. And this decreases the amount of nitrogen loss to runoff by basically improving the soil structure and enhancing aggregate stability of the soil, making them less vulnerable to erosion as well, but also reducing the emissions of nitrous oxide that is also associated so much with the addition of inorganic fertilizers. So applying these management principles serve adaptation needs by improving quality of the soil, but also helps decrease or reduce farmers' cost and dependence on external inputs as well. So they serve just more than mitigation and adaptation as it were. Another approach is use of agroforestry, basically involving incorporation of trees or woody plants in farmland, either with crops or livestock, or protecting what is already there. And agroforestry increases resilience of local communities by providing a variety or diversity of products. Yeah, but also are important in other services like nitrogen fixing, and therefore is one approach that would serve not only to increase productivity, but also reduce emissions through enhancing the capacity of the land to sequester carbon. Yeah, so trees and shrubs can reduce soil erosion and maintain high levels of biomass as compared to land that is regularly, cropped. So that's why having the perennials like the trees and shrubs are very important in sustaining or maintaining soil carbon storage. Livestock management strategies are also particularly critical for climate-smart agriculture, and this would involve improved pasture and grassland management. One of the most practiced is having rotational grazing that allows enough rest or regeneration of grazed areas. And if this is limited, then what follows is the degradation of the land. Regeneration of vegetation and restoration of degraded land, therefore, is also very key with respect to enhancing or reducing emissions, but also enhancing productivity, as it were. So such kind of practices contribute to mitigation through carbon sequestration, which is evident in deep-rooted vegetations and soils managed in a sustainable manner through use of appropriate grazing management systems. The other important approach is the diversity of land use across landscapes, because different parts of the landscape have different potential depending on the type of the soil, depending on the slope, depending on climate, and so on and so forth. And so when there's a diversified use of the landscape, then it optimizes the variation in terms of resources and capacity. And this helps to reduce the risk of production. When you diversify, when one fails, then all is not lost. It also helps to uniformly utilize the landscape to optimize, as it were, the various potential across the landscape. And it also helps to sustain minimally disturbed habitats within the landscape. Yeah, and this also enhances carbon storage in the soil. So one of the benefits of having diversity of land use across the landscape is to enhance field level benefits of climate smart practices, to secure ecosystem functions, but also to enhance the effectiveness of climate mitigation efforts. So as we conclude, some of the takeaways or the key messages here is that co-creation of knowledge and co-design of climate smart solutions are central to successful diffusion of climate smart practices and technologies. And that as we do this, we should be cognizant of the local climatic risk, the opportunities that exist in there to be able to seek synergies across different interventions and to be able to avoid maladaptation and maximize synergies as opposed to trade-offs. Farmer field schools provide a platform for farming communities and is very crucial for them in terms of knowledge sharing and also having facilitating experiential learning, which is very key at that level, especially where extension services are limited, either by personnel or resources. The climate smart villages are key in generating evidence and very crucial in developing area-specific technologies that are relevant at such local scales. And that the functional land management approach seeks to optimize the supply of soil functions from the land through sustainable use of soil resources. And this is where now the landscape approach and looking at climate smart agriculture, not only at farm level, but at the larger landscape comes in. Now, as a trainer, some of the questions that one may want to ask at the end of this session are, what are some of the examples of climate smart agriculture diffusion approaches that you find in Africa, for example, and also getting to know whether the participants understand some of the key steps for implementing climate smart villages as a research for development approach. And this is one approach that has been favored in the recent past and seems to be working quite well from what we can see from the West Africa case study. And you may also want to ask your participants or to discuss some of the key features that characterize climate smart agricultural landscape and some of the benefits that come from farmer field schools. So I guess I will end there.
Oliver,
Yes.
I am proposing that you ask us in the chat to give to respond to some of these questions that you have put up.
Yes.
In the chat.
Yeah, because I could not do that and at the same time. So so do we go with the chat or the Q&A? Because we have questions in both.
Yeah, even Q&A is okay, I think.
Okay. So let me see. Is it possible to access the materials? Yes, they will be shared. That is from Thomas. May you also provide the links for yesterday's materials? Thank you. I think that will be done. Anonymous attendee. Are there any active climate smart village project in Africa? Which are the countries? Yes. The example that I was giving is from CCAF's project in West Africa, and maybe I can provide the link below, but you can get it from the source. I provided the source, so if you can easily get it even online. Yes, there are. We also want the slides of every session. Yes, those will be provided. Is it moving so fast? Okay. Okay. Nancy Kadenyi. Climate smart agriculture is a very good initiative. Apart from just ticking the box of donors by list numbers of women, youth, etc., benefited would please share more how the gender aspect is well mainstreamed in these activities. What tools do you use to see gender disaggregated benefits? Thanks. Okay, so gender equity is quite key in climate smart agriculture. As we already know, women and the youth are key actors in agriculture, and particularly the women. And so I think most of these approaches try as much as possible to bring the women on board especially through the women group. Of course, I agree with you that we should get basically the reasons behind the numbers, not just the numbers, but the story behind the numbers. So yeah, I'm not a gender expert, but I do agree that this should be disaggregated by gender. Yes. Will this presentation be shared? Yes, it will be shared. Nancy Kadenyi, I hope by the end of the training, we can also be able to get more insights on the current research gaps in CSA that need to be addressed to improve land and water management. Yes, Nancy, and we have some work already done, basically to map some of the practices, ongoing or existing practices, and their indications on the gaps, areas that require intervention as well as research. So some of these materials, I think, can be provided because they are also available online on, yeah. Did I move so fast? I hope, this is from Nancy again, I hope by the end of this training, we can be able to get more okay, that's the gaps, that's already done. FLM approach is really a good way, but I tend to miss its indicators and metrics for effectiveness in relation to CSA and gender. Yeah, Nancy seemed to be a gender person, which is okay. So basically what you are asking are the indicators and specifically to do with gender. Would you please touch on this and thanks? Well, as I've indicated, I may not be competent enough to talk about gender issues, but as I've already indicated, some of this needs to be disaggregated by gender to see how much, who does, and how. Of course, the different gender are also affected differently, and they also respond differently, and they also engage in different practices. There are those which suit particular gender than the other, and so on and so forth. But with respect to the indicators and metrics, probably this requires more review of what is existing with respect to functional land management approach. Yeah. What diffusion methods are most suitable for each CSA technology? I think this would vary from one place to the other. What works in one place may not work we cannot work in other places. So approaches will vary depending on the situation, depending on who you are dealing with. but also, of course, depending on the practice. So it will be difficult to generalize and say a particular method is most suitable for a particular technology. How do we ensure suitability of climate smart agriculture practices? Sustainability. Of course, one way of ensuring sustainability is co-creating this knowledge and co-designing the technologies with the community. That's one way of doing that. Another way is using the evidence to be able to guide or inform decision makers, because once you have enabling policy and institutional frameworks, then they can easily be supported. Okay. Only one example in whole of Africa. Please provide West Africa source. Okay, I will provide that and try also to get more if there are many other examples. Where is Climate Smart Village located and what factors determine its location? Again, as I did indicate that prior to establishment of a Climate Smart Village, one has to do baseline study. And this baseline study basically reveals the appropriateness of a given location with respect on the basis of the climate, the priorities, and the gaps that need to be addressed. And so it depends very much on this with respect to design, because then after generating this baseline data, this is what is used in the design of a climate smart village. And so the design and the component will vary from one place to the other. Yeah. It is an interesting webinar. Having to say this is possible to provide certificate for this webinar because it is important for us. I will let someone else answer that. Is FLM approach the same as ecosystem management? Well, ecosystem management is quite broad. So within that, if you're managing at ecosystem or at landscape level, there are different approaches. Basically, FLM approach focuses on soil-based ecosystem services is the focus, but you're looking at this at landscape level. So ecosystem management is much, much broad, and this is just one aspect of looking at it. Is there a kind of a map that show appropriate climate smart agriculture practices across Africa? As I've said, there may be no map, but we have a number of reports already by CCAFs, but I think also ICRA that shows different climate smart agriculture practices in various countries that can be shared. Much appreciated for the illustrative and insightful presentation from the facilitators. I remember from the last presentation, two of the key steps for implementing CSV, which are baseline assessment and CS design. Yeah, thank you. So that is done with the Q&A. Okay, there is more on the chat, but probably some of them have touched on the Q&A. I don't know where to start on the chat. Okay.
Prof, maybe the best thing
you'll
would be
answer to some of
just
them.
answer them right just as the next session is going on.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I can respond to them as, yeah, okay. I think that's a better way of dealing with it. Yeah. So can we then shift the gears and ask my colleague to come in? I will try to reply to the comments on the chat as much as possible as the next session goes on. So kindly, Professor Kibe. Is Professor Kibe in there?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yes, he's
Yes.
around.
So, yes. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. I want to I'm trying to load my document here. I want to put it in power. I'm not getting the.
Prof, when you click on share screen, are you able to see it among the listed items?
Yeah, I can see it. I want to put it in the slide such that it is a slide
Okay.
format.
Okay. Maybe if it refuses, you can first share it and then you project it when it's already being shared.
Are you able to see this is in a complete page?
Yeah, not yet in a presentation mode, but I think it is coming. Yes, yes,
Yes.
there. Yes,
Okay,
it's okay now.
that's better.
It's okay.
Okay, welcome back to our session on climate smart agriculture. I hope you had a good night yesterday. I think we finished a bit late. I'll try and maybe not talk too much and maybe try to cover some of the things that I did not cover yesterday. I think there was a section here where I was supposed to ask a few questions. And I have some answers. If we can do some recap, we can remember that we had a number of greenhouse gases that are known to be notorious. Can I get some feedback? Which are these greenhouse gases that are eminent in causing global warming? Can I get some answers from the participants?
Prof, you want them to type or to talk or to?
I want them to talk. I would prefer them to talk just quickly.
Okay.
Because we are doing a recap. And, yeah.
Okay. Let them raise. Please raise your hands, and then we allow you to talk to respond to the questions.
You can see the questions on the screen. We also had some of the what we call as the clusters of CSA. I had a lot of tables. Those were mainly the clusters. I just want us to remind ourselves which ones they were, and of course, what exactly makes an agricultural technology or a practice climate smart. Those are the three questions I would want us to think about.
There is a raised hand from Harriet. Harriet, please unmute yourself. We have allowed you to talk. Please go ahead, Harriet.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Yes, Harriet.
I can remember from yesterday's session, the major greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide, the methane, nitrous oxide.
Good. That's great. Yeah. Carbon dioxide is the biggest contributor, or rather, us as humans contribute most to, they say about 78% of all the greenhouse gases produced by man is carbon dioxide. Okay? And which ones, what are these? They call them as anthropogenic sources. What are these activities that bring about carbon dioxide emissions? Which are these activities? Anybody?
Please raise your hands. Isa, and we have Aaron also. Isa, unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Aaron Obong from Uganda, the founder and the CEO of Lira Seedling Center. Some of the activities that cause the emission of carbon dioxide is burning the fossil fuels that I think, for example, I bring in the industries, actually the technologies that uses the fuels and the rest, that in turn, when out of burning and combustion, the carbon dioxide is brought out as the fourth as the burn. Let me just simplify it like that. So those machines, yes, yeah, that's from my side.
Great, that's great. A lot of from what we burn, especially when we are looking for energy, for cooking, the heat that we use for cooking, for heating our industries, we get from fossil fuel. They call it fossil fuel. That means we mine oil and then we transform it into either petrol or diesel, and also gas, the gas that we normally use for burning. And for those who can't afford those technologies, we cut down our trees and we burn the timber or the trees or the wood, and all this, they emit the carbon dioxide. Okay, what about the other one, the second one, that contributes 16%?
Isa, and then Alice, please respond.
What I remember is about the methane that are coming from the enteric fermentation, from ruminants, but also nitrous oxide that are coming in manure management. About the cluster of climate smart agriculture practice that I remember is all about the increasing productivity, climate effect mitigation and adaptation, also resilient agriculture practice.
Great. Yeah. Methane, enteric fermentation. In fact, they argue cows of the 16% total emissions that contribute, 16% that constitute methane, 8% come from livestock because of what they call as enteric fermentation. And if you remember, it's just about what kind of feed you feed your livestock. When you have very aged pastures, ranky, of ranky nature, that tend to be having a lot of cellulose in them, or rather they are lignified, it becomes very difficult to digest. And so they have to remain in the stomach and undergo some of those fermentation processes. And out of this, we end up having methane coming out. That's good. And then the third one, the nitrous oxide. Where does this come from? What are these human activities that bring about the production of N2O or nitrous oxide?
Isa, there is Isa or Girma, Fenta, Asefa. Isa, are you able to respond? Please go ahead, Isa. Fenta, Asefa. Asefa, unmute yourself. Oh, Girma. Yes, Fenta, please go ahead.
Yeah, there are a number of factors, human factors, that increase nitrous oxide to the climate change, which are from those, the first one is the applications of improper applications of nitrogen fertilizers, which is if the proportions or the amount of fertilizer is above the recommended one, it leads to the environment and volatiles also to the environment and contributes nitrous oxide to the climate change.
Good, good. Any other answer on that? Thank you, Asefa.
Wokat, Sebina, is it Sebini? Sebini, unmute yourself. Wokat. Wokat, unmute yourself and respond to the question. Wokat, Sebini.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we are having issues with internet, probably. But Asefa is right. We just the way we apply our nitrogen fertilizers and the type of soil management that we have. If the soils are tilled too much, the temperatures are too high, then we tend to have mineralization and we tend to lose some of this nitrogen and even carbon in forms that are in gaseous form. This can be in form of ammonium. When you apply nitrates, they can be ammonified and they end up into ammonium gas, especially where you have high temperatures. Nitrates also can go through a process we call as denitrification, and they end up also becoming nitrous gas, especially in reduced or submerged soils. So flooding can become a problem, and it's not just carbon dioxide that is reduced to methane, but you also have sulfates, which are reduced to sulfides. And if you go to marshy places, you tend to find a very bad smell, like a rotten egg. That's a sign of highly reduced soils where you find sulfates have been reduced to hydrogen sulfide, and so they have that kind of a smell. Even manganate, can be reduced to manganese. You have oxygen that is reduced to water. So all these reactions depend on the type of soil that they land into, or the type of whether it's having air or it's not having oxygen or air, as we may say. So now there were some things that we said about the issues of global warming. There was a fourth category of gases. Do you remember the fourth category of gases? And where do they come from? If you can see my figure there. These are human activities, they contribute all these 4 types of gases. Carbon dioxide, 76%. Methane, we said 16%. Do you remember this group of gases? Anybody? Where do they come from? I mentioned about refrigeration. We enjoy, you remember refrigeration?
I think Veronica wants to respond.
Yes, Veronica.
Veronica, unmute yourself and respond. Veronica?
Oh, yes,
Go ahead.
I have written in the chat from refrigeration, but maybe in terms of which group of chemicals, maybe the chlorofluorocarbons.
Okay, yes. Chlorine, fluorines, they tend to be, what they call as free radicals. They tend to have an electron that is less by 1, and they are waiting to couple or to grab any other person that is there, and they tend to go up into the air, and they can even grab oxygen and reduce what we call as the ozone layer, which can allow in a lot of radiation into the earth, leading to a lot of heat generating in the atmosphere. So when you understand that, then now we are able to say, how can we reduce the carbon dioxide emissions? Okay, now we go to the clusters. How can we reduce methane emissions if we know the sources they are coming from? How can we intervene and reduce nitrous emissions, nitrous oxide emissions? How can we reduce air conditioning, refrigeration systems that use the chlorofluorocarbons? Are there other chemicals that we can use that can help us in minimizing the emission? Because when you look at this graph here, this is with regard to potency or the ability of these chemicals or molecules holding heat. When you take carbon dioxide as 1, the standard, methane can take up 30% more. Not 30%, but 30 times more. Even though it is less, but it is much more dangerous. When it comes to nitrous oxide, 300 more times than carbon dioxide, it is able to hold the heat within our atmosphere. So the more methane we emit, the more methane we pump out into the air, especially from mines that are mining petroleum. It's the biggest problem in the Western world, where they are digging out fuel, oil, petrol and gas. The methane is a big problem. And in fact, they are saying that the only way is to burn it when they kind of direct it towards a certain area and they burn it. So one way is that, can we use methane to cook? Can we use it to be a source of energy that we need in our industries? Can we relate in a way that it becomes useful for us? And as you know, in the processes of biodegradation, like production of biogas and other methods that we use, we produce all these gases that can burn. Methane is one of them. Ethane is another one. Propane is another one. Butane is another one. All these are gases that can be used by man in a way that can help him. But again, they can be very, very, very dangerous. So I think when we look at the clusters, do you remember some of the clusters? I ended up with this one here, the Sustainable Bioenergy, SBE. Anaerobic. Anaerobic means without oxygen. Anaerobic digestion of energy crops. Residues. As I talked about wastes. We have a lot of wastes in our cities. If we manage them, we can be able to produce gases that we can be able to use. Let me reduce my picture. I don't know whether I can bring it to this end here. Yes. So the methane produced can replace fossil fuels in both heat and power generation, and also as a vehicle fuel. So those are some of the sustainable bioenergy. That's the cluster type where we have the biogas. Do we remember any of the other clusters? Anybody? We had classified them in like 6 of them. And we are going more or less now to repeat on how we can intervene within these clusters with practices that can help us to increase production, to adopt or to remain resilient, and also to mitigate or reduce the greenhouse gases. Which were these other clusters? Anybody?
Dorothy or Nancy?
Yes, please.
Dorothy, please go ahead.
Yes,
this is Dorothy.
Yeah.
We had a cluster called water harvesting and management, small scale irrigation.
Good, good.
Where we have it is type, we have mulching, then rainwater harvesting and storage. We had drainage management, irrigation, then minimum tillage. Then we had another one.
Yes.
Livestock and aquaculture management.
Okay.
Where we had the cluster type was aqua silviculture. Then we have the diet management, then manure management and rotational grazing.
Okay.
We had another, pardon?
Yes, go on, just go on.
Okay, we had another one, if I remember, crop diversification.
Crop diversification, yeah.
Where we had improved crop varieties. Then the other one, and the breeding. Then we have the post-harvest handling. In the post-harvest, we had the cluster type, post-harvest handling and food storage.
Yeah.
We had the food processing, food distribution and marketing, food consumption.
Wow. Dorothy,
that's what I remember.
You're a good student. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I am happy that you captured all those. And from there, I think we can move on then.
Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dorothy. You've captured all the areas that we had covered. Yeah. Okay, so I think we had talked about, again, the SBEs, sustainable bioenergy. This was improved cooking stoves. I remember Enoch asking, what if they don't fulfill all the 3 pillars? And there was a question there, what makes a practice climate smart? And Oliver was saying that they have to fulfill all the 3. They have to increase productivity. They have to be, resilient, bring about some kind of resilience or ability to adapt to that change in climate. And of course, they have also to reduce the greenhouse gases. So the stoves that are used, especially here in Kenya, I think I've seen them also in Asia. They tend to be more efficient in the way that they burn the fossil fuel. It might be coal or it can be charcoal. And so you use kind of the energy emitted much more efficiently. meaning that you don't have to go back and get your trees and cut and again burn it. So it reduces deforestation. And of course, when it emits less of the carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and also nitrogen oxide, they improve on health. We've heard of children and the people who have actually died in their houses when they've left wood burning, and you just simply go sleep, and nobody would know, but the carbon monoxide can be very, very dangerous. And we've lost families who have closed their windows because it's cold outside. So you have this wood burning, and it's a small room, and there are many of you, and you sleep into the next life, which usually is not something that is very good. So so I would want us to now go into the illustrated examples as our topic suggests. And are you able to see? I'm trying to shift my camera. Are you able to see my camera as I shift it in my screen?
Yeah, I think we are focused now on the slides. If your network is not very strong, you can actually remove the camera, and then we focus on the slides. But it's okay. We are seeing you.
Okay, but
Yes.
is it covering the pictures on the slide?
The slide is okay.
Or is okay on your side?
Yes, the slide is okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the water harvesting and management cluster, we had irrigation. There are different types of irrigation systems. Of course, irrigation is the artificial application of water, particularly when we have water scarcity that might have been brought about by drought. Nowadays, we are talking about supplemental irrigation, where you are supplementing whatever rainfall may have fallen in your region. You don't need to apply full irrigation, but you can apply partial irrigation, or you supplement the rainfall in a way that you are able to support the crop growth and yield. So irrigation helps in increasing productivity, as we mentioned. It helps the farmer to remain resilient and able to adapt to drought situations. And it increases the biomass production, which is a method of absorbing the carbon dioxide, which in other terms we call as sequestering, and therefore it reduces the amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we have intercropping. Intercropping, as you see the picture there. This is a pigeon pea and maize intercropping. We know that when you intercrop, it's like growing 2 crops or 3 crops in the same field in the same time, over a period of time. Might be the same season or the same year. How does it increase productivity? Of course, we do certain studies in agronomy where we evaluate the land equivalent ratio. This is usually defined as the land or cropped area that you need to get the same yield as a single standing crop. So when you are intercropping 2 crops, is it giving you an additional yield? Though you are using 1 acre, but when you grow 2 crops like the maize and pigeon pea, would it yield much more than when you grow a crop in a single stand? So the land equivalent ratio, when it goes beyond 1, if you get 1.1, means you've gotten about 10% more yield within the same unit area. So pigeon pea, maize, pigeon pea intercrops are considered to be some of the best because they can even give you 1.4. That means 40% more than you get in a single stand maize crop. So productivity is increased. Of course, it varies with the, again, amount of rainfall, issues of space income, issues of crop competition are there. But when you come up with standard optimum plant populations, then you can also be able to help increase the biomass production. And of course, you can mitigate against crop failure. In fact, it's part of the diversity. Most of the small-scale farmers, they tend to diversify their crops by intercropping or growing mixed crops together. So that's another important climate smart practice that we can adopt. We also have soil covers. I think we mentioned about mulching. You can see that picture there. It helps to reduce evaporation. We had a study in the coastal region where the rainfall amounts in Mombasa, Kilifi area in Kenya, they receive more rainfall than in Njoro. In Njoro, we only receive about 960 millimeters of rainfall annually, as compared to Kilifi, where we receive over 1,200 or 250 millimeters annually. But they are food insecure. So we went there and we asked ourselves what could be the problem. And the major problem was the winds that come during the month of June and July. They come from the Indian Ocean and they blow, they're so strong that even the crops tend to lean away from the wind and they carry away all the moisture that is in the soil and creating a kind of soil moisture deficit. And so we were thinking, how do we kind of mitigate against this? And we try to spray some anti-transpirants because the crop also loses moisture through transpiration. And also we added mulch. The mulch came from the coconut coir. You know, when you harvest the coconut, there are those husks. So they're usually thrown. So, you know, the farmers can easily use them for mulching. And the results were amazing. In fact, the mulching helped in reducing evaporation and ultimately increase the yield significantly. So soil cover, especially for crops that are widely spaced or that grow slowly, can make a very, very big difference in reducing moisture loss, especially in places where there's a tendency of having high winds at high temperatures, which lead to high evaporative demand. So they also, as I mentioned earlier, there's an issue of mineralization where you might lose some of your nutrients due to high activity of microorganisms in high temperature soils. So the way we manage our soils is very, very key to the way we can safeguard against emissions of certain gases and enhancing the nutrient use efficiency. So we have certain cover crops like cowpeas, velvet beans, soya beans, and common beans. They tend to be short, they grow fast, and they have a shorter life cycle than the main crop. We also have a section of grazing management. Here is where we integrate aquaculture. Aqua means water. In deltas, whether you're talking about the Niger River, we talk about the Nile Delta. In India, we talk about the Ganges, the big rivers. In the US, we talk about the Mississippi River. You know, all of those, when they're coming into the ocean, they tend to slow down and there are a lot of floods. In Kenya, we also have the Tana River. And those flood areas, what do we do with them? Swamps form, and it's possible to, to have both livestock. It's possible to have fish farming within them. in the swampy areas. Like we have Budalangi here in Kenya, which also floods as we border towards Uganda along the lake region, Lake Victoria region. So when we integrate crop production with fish farming, that is what we may call as aquaculture. Rice production systems in these deltas I mentioned, in the big rivers as they come into the seas, have become very, very important. And people are learning methods of how you can, because of eutrophication. You remember I mentioned about the high nitrogen phosphorus deposition due to leaching and deep drainage. We should avoid applying a lot of fertilizers which can go into our lakes and ponds and rivers. But again, they can become useful if we grow crops like rice and jute and arrowroot, because then they are naturally fertilized. So that kind of an integrated system can help us to minimize some of the high nutritional levels that are coming from anthropogenic activities or man-made sources. You can see here there's a last sentence. Maybe I can mention livestock is also responsible for 14.5% of the greenhouse gas emissions. When I heard this, in fact, I heard from a Nigerian scholar. He had come to Egerton University. He was studying, he was doing his postdoc, and he visited us, and he told me, do you know that we should reduce our livestock because they are they're the greatest emitters of methane? And I refused. I said, no, how is that? And we went on ahead and discussed, and I started reading about it. And these are some of the mind changes that we need to change and understand that even though they are natural, they are nature-based. When we enhance certain enterprises, like when you go to countries like Australia, they have intensified livestock production to an extent that they are some of the biggest emitters of methane. And their meat export industry is bigger than our agricultural activities and income generating activities from agriculture in Kenya, all combined together. And do you know where they are sending their meat? They are sending it to the Middle East. They have even they have employed imams who come and they pray over when they are slaughtering the animals. An imam must be there and offer a prayer such that the meat is halal. And we were arguing, if the Australians have done this and they are so many kilometers away from Middle East, how come us as Africans are not able to do it? And so issues of integration, issues of thinking smart, but again, there are those dangers of emissions. What do we do to mitigate against this? Very, very key. We grow more trees. We grow more pastures. As you can see in the diagram that is shown here, this is a rotational kind of grazing system, in a paddock system, and you keep rotating them from one season to another, and you are allowing the other paddocks to grow. And in doing that, they create biomass, more photosynthesis. More photosynthesis, there is a higher intake of carbon dioxide as it is assimilated into carbohydrates and other compounds that are useful. Of course, I belabored the issues of the type of pasture, avoid having them overgrown. In fact, we are talking about our diets. We should eat more vegetables and less of meat. There's a lot of debate. In Kenya, we love we are great meat eaters, and so we end up being sick because of that. But you can eat white meat. Fish is what I eat nowadays. As I'm growing a bit older, white meat is considered to be better than red meat. So let us look at those. We change our diets, eat more vegetables, eat more white meat, and we will also contribute towards mitigating against emissions of greenhouse gases. And of course, the livestock that feed, you should feed them with the right kind of feed systems. So integrated systems such as rice, fish, livestock, food energy systems optimize efficiency in the use of resources, therefore advancing the synergistic objectives of climate smart agriculture. Okay, then we have, again, we have agroforestry. Fast growing trees, you grow them together with your food crops. You can see here there is an irrigation system. Agroforestry trees tend to grow very fast, and they are grown in alleys. You kind of have maybe one or two of them growing, and then you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's called an alley. It's like a way or a path that even a vehicle can pass. It's that wide, but you have one particular crop species, and then you have another one. I remember one of my supervisors, he was doing studies in this, and he was growing Leucaena. There's an agroforestry tree that was known as Leucaena, and he used to tell me, go and lop them, cut them. When I'm frustrated with my studies, I would get that machete, and in anger, I used to go and cut them, and then he would be angry because I was not cutting them in a way that they could regrow easily. So there are issues of management in agroforestry trees, and in between he was growing wheat. So we would lop the Leucaena branches when we don't have wheat and leave them on the ground during the summer, and then they would drop their leaves, and those leaves, because they are high in carbohydrate, in protein, that would be assimilated into the soil and would contribute towards an integrated kind of nutrient management system. And then when we grow the wheat later on in the winter, we would not use a lot of nitrogen fertilizers. So agroforestry has a lot of advantages. It is a way to go, and it's not just using agroforestry trees that contribute wood for fuel, but we can now use fruit trees. We can come in with our avocados, we can come in with our citrus plants, we can come in with our mangoes, can intercrop them with the pigeon pea, we can have our cowpea in the drought areas, and in that way we can be able to sequester a lot of greenhouse gases. Okay, so it would help us also to improve farm incomes and of course nutrition security because of the diversity that comes from growing woody perennials alongside crops, as well as they also contribute towards livestock. So we continue with the advantages that the ecosystem services that include provisioning, regulating, cultural and supportive services. They are together incorporated in agroforestry systems, issues of improved soil fertility, etc., as I mentioned earlier. Okay. Then we go now to the part of the soil and water conservation technologies. This, as I had said earlier, they make effective use of soil water reserves. I think we mentioned about mulching. Some of them, they also slow down the rate of runoff flow, and so they minimize erosion. Others, they kind of hold the water and allow it to seep into the soil, and the soil behaves like a reservoir, or I may say even as a sponge, and it keeps water there. If there's too much water in the sponge, it kind of drips down below due to forces of gravity. But if it's not too much, it remains within the sponge. So water, the soil kind of behaves the same way. It can become one of our practitioners in the dry areas used to say, we have a lake in our soils. We make sure that we allow rainwater to seep into the soil, and it is stored in our soils for use as the crop grows. So we have those kinds of interventions that help to increase productivity, help in increasing the resilience, that means fighting against droughts. And of course, with increased biomass production, we sequester the greenhouse gases. Again, there's the other side of it. If you have too much water, you remember, you end up having no oxygen in the soil after 4 days or so. Oxygen is completely depleted, especially if there's a hard pan and that water cannot go anywhere. The water soil becomes saturated and you start seeing ponding. When that happens, then you start losing on some of the nutrients, especially nitrogen, as it is transformed, and also carbon dioxide, it is reduced to methane gas. So we need to drain the water out, We have a place where we receive a rainfall of about 1,600 millimeters of rainfall annually. And you just can't crop that land. It's always been flooded, and the soils are clay. They tend to be clay, and so they hold water, and then they are not that deep. So you have, the soil depth is kind of narrow. So they are always flood. So when we talk to the farmers, we tell them, put out drains to drain, and because it's slopey, direct them towards where the river valleys are. And of course, you might end up having ponding, but it helps in at least removing that extra water from the soil, and your crops will not rot or they'll not die for lack of oxygen. We also have contour bands and hedgerows, as you can see that figure there. It's more like alley farming again, where you have a hedgerow. I saw this also in our tea farms because of the high winds. In places where you have a lot of winds, you can have some of these hedgerows, which might be having trees or shrubs that can stop the speed of those winds, because winds, they enhance evaporation and they enhance transpiration. So in that way, you can be able to conserve your moisture and provide it, make it available for your crops. Contours, the kind of, it's like a kind of a bench. It's on a slope, and this one might be lower, but contours can be long. They are not like terraces, which tend to be narrow. They can even be to a maximum length of 100 meters. Can imagine a football field that's about 80 meters. A contour can be that wide. And then you have your hedge that breaks the soil from being eroded in case of high rainfall. You slow down the runoff, and so you save your soil. But within those hedge rows, you plant your staple food or your cash crop. You can also have earthen bands by excavating a channel and creating a small ridge on the downhill side. We normally call here, fanya juu. You can lift the soil upwards, and so you form a band. They are more like what you find in rice cultures, which hold water within. In dry lands, we do that because we don't want this water seeping away or running away. So we have those bands which hold the water from going downhill. And so it allows the water to seep in and it is conserved in the soil. But the whole idea is you have to have that water going below 15 centimeters, because in some of these soils that are, are small, like clay silt soils, there is what you call as capillaries, and water can move upwards during capillary, and especially when we have high temperatures, you tend to lose a lot of moisture due to high atmospheric water demand through capillary action. So conserving water below 15 centimeters through chisel plowing or some kind of deep tillage can help conserving water. Okay, then of course bench terraces are what you see there. They tend to be narrower than the contour terraces. Flat beds created by bench terraces enable the cultivation of crops on medium to steep slopes. These are between 12 to 47% in steepness. So bench terraces are not recommended for slopes less than 12%, soil depth of greater than 57 centimeters, and areas with no gullies, no stones. So there are certain recommendations when you are developing some of these interventions. You find that if some place is too slopey, then the bench is too narrow and it may not be able to hold the soil and the water. So sometimes you bring in even ditches, or you bring in stone barriers, as you can see here, to just slow down the runoff and induce a natural process of terracing, and also you rehabilitate eroded and abandoned land. This is mostly in dry areas, for those who come from dry areas, or semi-arid and arid areas, and which tend to be rocky. You have a lot of stones that you can put like this across at 90 degrees to the slope, such that when water comes falling or running down this way, it finds a barrier. And it increases infiltration, as I mentioned, and of course, reduces erosion. Ditches. I think I remember in my youth, I did this work because I come from a place with high rainfall, and the soils tend to become very, very wet, and they can even move. We have mudslides. So my grandmother told me, hey, you get along with your cousin and go dig a ditch. And it was one of the most difficult work I ever did, because it has, it has to be deep enough to take in all this rainwater and drain it out towards the valley. As you see, this one is going out towards that side. So I think this is a tea farm which receives, tea is grown in areas receiving over 1,400 millimeters of rainfall. That's a lot of rain. It literally rains throughout the year. So if your soils are loose, how do you help them? You can grow colocasia, the arrowroots, because it floods, but create your own small stream by digging a kind of a ditch drainage that will move out the water. So sometimes they can also be used for retention, okay? If you need that water for use later on, again, it can retain, so long as you close the lower end, you don't allow the water to go out. It's more like the tide furrows. We have tide furrows in the drylands, where we have a furrow and then we tie it on maybe every 2 meters, we put a band. A furrow, every 2 meters, we put a band. That's for retaining. It creates a kind of a ditch, and so water comes in there and it is able to infiltrate. And on the lower end, you can grow your fodder, As you can see here and in there, you have your colocasia that in cases when it floods can grow even under standing water, even if it is deoxygenated. Then we have the check dams. As you can see my picture there, Oliver, if you're there, please tell me where to stop so that I don't go through our notes, which we may be needing for Monday. I noticed that I have already reached 6.3.
It is okay. I know where when it comes to teaching, you will be easily carried away.
And it's already 5.
So don't worry about that.
Maybe
you can stop there and have questions and comments, and then we can continue from there on Monday. Yeah. It's already 5.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Participants, you're most welcome to ask a question or give a comment on my presentation on the practices that we consider to be climate smart.
Can I respond to one of the charts, which I think I probably need to explain?
Yeah.
Because
you're most welcome.
It's bordering on one of the areas of my interest, because I work a lot with in the arid and semi-arid areas, and also with pastoralists. And I was just following up on a comment by someone was asking, how do we practice rotational grazing in the pastoral and agropastoral system? Yeah. And I did say that the pastoralists already practice rotational grazing through herd mobility. They may not call it, they may not have physical boundaries and call them paddocks as we do. Their paddocks are virtual. So, and their movements are actually not opportunistic, but strategic. So they're deliberately designed to give rest to areas that have been grazed and move to other areas. If you don't restrict their mobility, then what happens is that by the time they come back to where they started with, these areas shall have already regenerated. And that's how they have managed to keep the very vast dry landscapes in condition in which they are. So I think I'm basically trying to emphasize this because it's important also to build when we are thinking about the climate smart practices, to build on what the pastoralists are already doing. Yeah, because we start from what they know, because they know. So it should not always come from us, and then we build on that. We make it even better. So I wanted to emphasize that. Thank you. Back to you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much for that contribution. I'm also seeing some comments here. Nancy is not very happy that we are blaming our pastoralists for being contributors to greenhouse gases. As I said, I also wasn't very happy when I heard this. Because it's a natural thing. I think we found the cattle here on our lands, and they've been living with us all this time. The concern is, I think, as I mentioned, about intensification. When we become great meat eaters and we don't care what we are feeding our livestock, then there is a danger in that we will continue adding methane into the atmosphere. And we mentioned it 30 times more able to capture heat and thus contribute to global warming. What some of the interventions that I was reading through breeding animals that are able to efficiently digest, quickly some of the crops that might be having indigestible material. Though that can be an intervention. Animals that also can produce a lot of milk or meat or hide very, very fast within a short period, such that they do not live for long. If you are a meat eater, some people may not be happy, especially in the subcontinent of India. But if you're a meat eater, then try and have your meat production as fast as possible with animals that have been bred for that particular purpose. They have efficient ruminizing, abilities, and of course the types of feed that you eat. You feed them. They should not be feeds that produce methane. I think that is where our research should be. What are these feeds that, when they are being fermented, produce methane? Of course, we mentioned about the issues of lignification and age of the pasture. Then there is an issue, am I correct in saying bench terraces is what we call here in Kenya as fanyaju? Yes, I agree with you. So long as you create a bench onto which you can plant your crops within that slope, then it becomes a terrace, but it's a bench. The only difference is how wide is that bench. Some are very narrow. If the slope is very, very steep, like if you go to some tea or coffee growing areas. But if it's a bit narrower, then you end up with a wider bench. If again it's too wide, then you end up with contours. Then what is the level of communal or collective adoption of these practices to transcend to cumulative impact of adoption? Well, I think this behoves the governments, the county governments, regional governments, provincial governments, to collectively come together. I think Oliver mentioned about some of the barriers that are there. Issues of policies, issues of just what people think, the cultural issues. All this we have to have a mind shift and start seeing how can we intervene in order for us to minimize, maybe drought effects or flood effects, to minimize pest effects that may arise due to high temperatures, to minimize application of some of the pesticides, to minimize using, fossil fuel. Now they're talking about electric cars. But what is the government doing about it? Are they supporting the research and development of, hybrid cars? Are they minimizing the cost by reducing the taxation? Like when you see some of our politicians and people who have money in our country, they have these big cars that we call them as fuel guzzlers. Why do you need a vehicle that is 3,000 cc's and you use it alone, and it keeps emitting all these, nitrogen gases, carbon gases that bring about global warming? Can we go like the China way, the India way, Singapore way, where our leaders, they collectively, marshal people, or even us as youth now, as you're seeing the Gen Z, is going out and demonstrating against this kind of lifestyle that is not adding any value to our lives. we can be mobilized, or we can create awareness and be able to work communally. So long as we have smart people, hardworking people, and people who care about the future. So the level that is currently there, I think it varies from country to country. As I mentioned, in our country, we have done a lot of communal work when it comes to Fanya Juu, or the bench terracing in our country where we have mountainous regions. We have contour farming in where we have large-scale farms in relatively less sloping areas of about 12% or low. And you can find the Ministry of Agriculture has been able to send these messages. So it is there, but I think much more work needs to be done, especially on use of fossil fuels and reducing of the greenhouse gases. Those are the questions that I'm seeing here in my screen. Okay, maybe I see something else. How can we fight fall armyworm using CSA? Oh, that's a good question. Who has an answer? Fall armyworm. Where did it come from? Yeah, it's a pest that was not a pest before, isn't it? It was not producing as much damage as it is now. It seemed to have resistance to a lot of our pesticides or insecticides. But now people are coming up, the Chinese are coming up with a mixture of pesticides or insecticides that can be able to kill it. Maybe we should look at the biological methods of interventions, the integrated approach to pest management. We have like the neem oil or neem extracts. Here we have Pymac that comes from the pyrethrin. It contains some of the pyrethrins, which make it difficult for these moths and the mother moths from laying their eggs. When you apply this along your crops within the furrows, like if it's your maize crop, then they are disoriented and they are not able to lay eggs. And so you find that you minimize the population of worms. That's what comes to my mind about this question, but there might be someone who might have an added answer to it. Okay, I think, is there anything else? I think those are the questions I'm having. Maybe if there are no other questions, thank you very much for having been patient and listened. It's getting to 5:20. Maybe we should not stay longer than this as we did yesterday. Over to you, Oliver and David. Or Nada.
Thank you very much, Professor Kibe. This was a very interesting one, especially the debate about methane emissions from livestock. I think that we can revisit that. If we finally form the WhatsApp group, we can have discussions about this, because the discourse has been mainly on the emissions from extensive vis-a-vis intensive systems. But of course, all pointers are quite clear on this, that there are more emissions under intensive systems. And some of the research we have done actually allude to that, because there's a way that the landscapes in the extensive livestock systems offset the otherwise high enteric emissions from livestock themselves. And when it comes to management of manure also, we realize that there are high emissions from the way the manure is stored, for example, in feedlots, but also the slurry in the slaughterhouses and so on. So this is a very healthy debate, and maybe we can take it further without basically, making livestock keepers feel bad if we stop eating meat. So there are trade-offs.
We should become vegetarians. Being a vegetarian is better.
There are a lot of trade-offs here. If you want something good, there's something that you have to give up.
Yeah.
So I think this can go on and on. I guess we carry on the remaining debate and discussions for tomorrow. We probably may have more time, not tomorrow, not rather Monday. So we are meeting again on Monday from 3 to wrap it up, and probably we may have more time to discuss about these issues and revisit probably what is pending. We may have not been able to answer all your questions, so we can create time so that we have more discussions around your concerns or comments, as it were. So back to you. Sorry?
So thank you very much, Prof. And thank you very much, participants, for joining us today. We shall be meeting on Monday at 3 p.m. EST, which is 12 noon GMT. So please do join us then for the final session and round of discussion on this Climate Smart Agriculture Basics under the ACRA program. Thank you very much. Profs Oliver and Anthony, could you stay behind, or David, could you create us a link and we have a discussion briefly?
Let me send you the link.
Okay, thank you very much.
You don't want us to stay behind, because yesterday you went.
No, today I want you to stay behind. I want you to get into the link that David is sharing, and then we have a small discussion. Is that okay?
Okay, let's do it quick.
Yeah, it will take like 10-15 minutes.
Receive the peace.